What's up, guys? Today I figured I'll show you some maintenance on a snowblower, and I got the cover already off on here. Now this is something that I didn't give much thought in the past. I just figured there's not much maintenance to a snowblower. Well, in fact, there is maintenance in a snowblower. So first thing, you're gonna remove this cover. I already did that, and you're gonna see a friction wheel here. Now you can see mine's chewed up, so you got to remove this whole assembly in here. And then also these wheels, you see this shaft right here? Well, I had a real hard time getting these wheels off because they were starting to rust, and I'll give you some tips on that. And these are pretty straightforward. All you do is pretty much take the pin out, and if you're lucky and you're smart enough, you already did this, you greased, actually I would put Never Seas on here, and then over here you got some washers, and then right here you have a bronze bushing, and it does have some, it's like flats on it, and it does go in here. So this needs some grease, just a little bit, and then that's gonna go in. The other thing you're gonna want to take note of is, and I already did this, these washers get stuck, and that's because the pin keeps rocking back and forth, and it created a burr here and here. So all I did is take a file and file that down. I cleaned this up real good. And you don't want your wheels to get, rusted on here, because that's going to be a total nightmare. Okay, the other thing I wanted to say is, when I was trying to get this wheel off of that shaft there, this little plastic bushing, this actually is called a sleeve bearing, and it slips in here. Now mine is cracked, so I'm gonna have to replace that, but this just simply slides over like so, but it's in the wheel, so you gotta, hopefully yours won't come out, but if it does, you're gonna have to tap that in, and it just goes flush. I'll show you on the other wheel when I get that off. Okay, so I don't know if you're going to be able to see it or not, but that sleeve is right in there, and it's only on this side. This side, actually there is one in this side too. You can kind of see it down there. So there's actually two of them. There's one there and then one there, and that keeps the wheel from rotating back and forth. Another thing worth mentioning is sand these up and put some Never Seas on them so they don't get stuck in this side of the shaft. Now this shaft here just kind of free floats back and forth because you got another bronze bushing here with a washer. Now there's only one washer on this side, so you just kind of want to orientate all of that stuff and put it aside. And this shaft doesn't have to come out, but this one does. So what we got is a bolt here and a nut here. What we're gonna do is put a crescent wrench right here. So after you have the crescent wrench here, do not put the crescent wrench on here. This is your wheel that the friction wheel rides on and spins your auger. So after you have this, you're going to want to brace that, and then you're going to break this one loose, and you'll do the same on this side. And then these are bearings over here, you can see them, they just pop out. And there is a shoulder that is on one side that keeps them from going in, and they go from the outside in. The other thing to note is your shifter lever. This bar has a little screw type pivot, keeps this locked in place. So when you put this back together, you're going to make sure that this hole and that pin line up so this doesn't move, or you won't have forward and reverse. Okay, so after we get this bolt out here, you're just gonna see a washer and a nut, or a washer and a bolt. And the other thing before I move on, take note of that pin, because there's two different sides and this goes in a certain way. On this side, this is your threaded part. You have a washer and then you have your nut, and all this bearing does is just pop out. They're sealed bearings, so you don't need to worry about greasing them or anything. So we're gonna just put that one in here with the other parts on this side. And then just push that in like that, pull it out. We'll set that on the side, and you can see there is some wear on the teeth, but we're going to clean this up with some carb cleaner, and then we're going to re-grease that, but you don't use a lot of grease. Okay, so here's that other part I was telling you about, that pin in this. This just, you know, if you just rotate it, kind of mess with it, just comes right out like that. And then we'll get to removing the friction wheel itself. The other thing to note is there is a roll pin on this side of the shaft. So that part went that way, and this part is our gear part. So this just slides out of this way because you're not going to get it out with that roll pin. So we'll clean the shaft up. We'll take these 3 screws out on this side, and you're gonna need a wrench to take these 3 out, and then these 2 pieces here come apart, your rubber comes out, you put the new one back on, and then reassemble it, and you can see right there, there's the threads from the opposite side. Okay, so after we got all them bolts out, you want to clean that up. You got this cleaned up here, and then this part here, you can see that just separated, and we're gonna just pull this apart like so, and there's your old friction wheel. We'll install the new one, but first we want to clean all this up. Don't be lazy, clean all this up, it's gonna help you. So the other thing I want to tell you guys is make sure you clean this part out too with like carb cleaner or something. And when you're putting this back on, you can see there's these little pieces here. Now these holes, you can see here, this is where the bolt went through. You got to line these holes up so whatever bolts went through this way, you got to make sure these holes line up with the threaded ones. And then you can see over here, this is a threaded one. So then that hole on the other side will line up with that one. Alright, so we got our new friction ring, and there's the part number there. It's not the MTD part number. I'll list that in the description below. But what you want to do is take the old one and put the new one up to it. Make sure the inside diameter, outside diameter is right, which it looks to be. I'm going to take this, I'm going to put that there, and then this has some flats on it here, and like I said, make sure you line the holes up where the bolts go through so you don't forget that. And we'll assemble this with the bolts. And so it's worth noting too, you want to start these bolts on this side and then just kind of snug them up, not even snug, and then you want to put these bolts in from this side and then kind of snug them up. It's going to bring the 2 pieces together to make sure the friction ring is in the center, and then go about snugging this side and then snugging that side. Right, so once we got that all tightened up, and make sure you know they're tight, not just snug, but do each side and each bolt rotate it. We're gonna come up here now to here. All I'm using is some rubbing alcohol. We're gonna wipe this disc while everything's out of the way real good. Get all that grime off there from the old wheel. Okay, so the next thing what we're gonna do is take some grease, and we're just gonna go ahead and lightly give it a coating. Same over here on the teeth. Okay, so that's about how much grease you want. You don't want a real lot. I did grease where the bearings go a little bit too. Same on this side, but don't grease the threads. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna do is add a little bit of grease in here. Not a lot, just to coat it. But to grease this, all we're gonna do is get a little bit of grease on our finger, and we're just gonna rotate the wheel until we get that whole ring gear just with a light coating. You don't want to overdo it because you don't want this dripping down onto that, or your friction wheel isn't going to make contact and it's not going to spin the auger. Okay, so when I say light coating, that's what I mean, light coating, just a little bit. Okay, so make sure this part is facing towards the gear. You slip that on, and then you're going to want to wipe the extra grease off on that side, and if you have any extra grease there, you're going to want to wipe that off. Okay, I did add a little bit of grease just to the outsides of the bearings, and that's more or less just to have it stick in here so it'll stay, because it keeps falling out. It's not necessary. Okay, so all we're going to do is take some alcohol, put it on a Scott towel, and then just make sure you rub it on the wheel in case you got any grease on there. That'll clean it off. The other thing you want to do is just take the piece of Scott towel and then just rub it on the shaft to get any kind of excess grease off, and even over here. Now the pinion gear here has a little bit of grease on it. You don't need all of that over there, so we're just going to go ahead and use the Scott towel, kind of wipe that off so it's not dripping on that plate. We did tighten up this bolt, and again with the crescent wrench, and then over here you tighten the nut up, and you're pretty much done. The shifter knob is back in place, so the shifter will work. Okay, so all we're gonna do is use some grease, and we're gonna put some grease on the inside of that and just a little bit on the out. You don't want to overdo it on the outside, but you want to get some grease on the inside. We'll slip this onto the shaft there. Okay, so you got that one in, and you got that one in, and what you want to do is make sure you put a little bit of grease on the washers front and back there. Okay, so once you got that greased up, what we're going to use is some Never Sees here, and we're just going to slop it all over the shaft there. Here. So all we did is just paint that on right around the shaft. Now we'll slip the wheel on. Okay, so another important part here is on one side of your snowblower you're going to see two holes. Those two holes are for this pin. And if you remember earlier, I told you take note of the way this pin goes in. That's because if you choose to stick it through, put the wheel on and then stick it in this pin, this flat side is going to butt up against this wheel, and it's going to allow this wheel to free float, and you're not going to have posi traction. Now, if you put it in this pin through the shaft on the second hole, you'll have posi traction, meaning the two wheels will spin. So we have our pin with some anti-seize on, so we're just going to go ahead, slip that in there, lock that down, and now this side is done. Okay, so after you get both sides done, I can't get this one done yet because I'm going to be waiting for parts. I didn't know that sleeve was bad. So I did find another problem with this wheel. This sleeve here that goes on the back side, that's flush. On the other wheel I showed you, it goes in maybe about an inch This one here, if you could see that shot, that's got to come out. Okay, so we got the wheel set in here on top of a vise. We have the outer part of the wheel that the pin goes through. What we're going to do is take a measurement here. The shoulder of that nylon bushing to out here measures 1 inch. We also have a 5/8 inch socket, and what we're going to do is flip this wheel over, and then we're going to put the socket with the extension, tap that old one out, then we're going to put the new one, we're going to tap it in till it's flush here, then we're going to take the socket and we're just going to tap that down until it reaches the 1 inch mark. You could also use a deep well and wrap a piece of masking tape around it if you want to be precise. To give you some perspective, all we did is flip the wheel over, and all we're doing is tapping that down until it pops out. And there's the underneath. You can see the bushing starting to push out. So there you go, you got the bushing out. Okay, now when you're putting this cover on, you're gonna note there's a slot here and here, and you're also gonna note that there's a bend. So this goes in and it slides in that way, pushes up, and then this piece gets pushed under this piece here, like so, and then you put your bolts in. Okay, another tip to putting this on, take some Never-Seez and put these on the bolts, because if they get rusted, you're not going to get it off and it's going to cause you problems.